It was about 5:30 on a Sunday evening when Melissa casually walked through the front door, acting as if she didn't have a care in the world. She tossed her purse and keys onto the nightstand without even acknowledging me sitting there and headed straight down the hallway toward our bedroom. I wasn't even sure if she saw me in the office, but honestly, it didn't matter. Lately, it felt like I'd become completely invisible to her. It's been that way for a while now, like I just don't exist in her world anymore. So, I decided to get up and follow her. I picked up her keys, slipped my spare one off her ring, and started rummaging through her purse. I grabbed her phone, pulled out her wallet, and took every dollar of cash and credit card she had, stuffing it all into my pocket. For good measure, I even took her driver's license before slipping back into the office, making sure it looked like I hadn't done a thing. About 15 minutes later, Melissa came out of the bedroom, dressed to the nines, looking like she was ready to head out to some party. She finally noticed me then but barely gave me a passing glance as she slung her purse over her shoulder and reached for her keys. "I'm going out with the girls from work." "Don't wait up," she said, as if I was just supposed to accept that without question. But this time, I wasn't letting it slide. "No, you're not going out with the girls from work," I told her flatly. She didn't even flinch. "How many times do I have to tell you, Adam? You don't control me." "I'll do whatever I want," she snapped, like I was some clueless fool. I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not saying you can't go out with them. I'm saying you're not, because I know you're off to see your boyfriend. Don't lie to me, Mel. I'm not an idiot." For a second, she just stood there, staring me down. Then, in that bold, defiant way she has, she marched right into the office and got right in my face. "All right, Adam, let's stop playing games. You've got two options. You either give me some space to fix this mess of a marriage, or I'll divorce you and make sure you're out of my life for good. What's it gonna be?" I couldn't help but smirk. "I'll take door number 3, I shot back. She rolled her eyes like she was dealing with a child. "There is no door number 3, Adam. Either accept that I've moved on and found a real man, or you'll face the consequences." At that, I stood up, walked over to her, and pushed her back against the wall. Not too rough, but enough to make my point crystal clear. I pulled off her engagement ring and wedding band, leaning in close. "Here's your door number 3, Mel," I growled, locking eyes with her. "It's my front door. And when you walk out of it, that's the last time. You won't be walking out with anything else. No more money. No more house. No more car. And no more daughter. You'll be done." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "You're living in some kind of fantasy, Adam," she muttered. "My lawyer's going to destroy you by tomorrow. I'll have the divorce papers sent to your office. If you try to mess with me, you'll regret it." I grabbed her by the arm and dragged her toward the front door. Her high heels clattered against the floor as she stumbled, yelling in a mix of rage and panic. It was almost strange to see her like that. After all these years of her acting tough, she had no idea how to handle me finally standing up for myself. Once I got her outside, I slammed the door shut and locked it behind her. I had changed the locks earlier that day. As I leaned against the door, catching my breath, I pulled out my phone and made the first call. I dialed my 19-year-old daughter, Emma, who was away at college. "Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Things with your mom, well, it's come to a head. Looks like she's moving in with her boyfriend. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I've got recordings of our last few conversations, along with plenty of our old arguments, in case you ever want to hear the real story. She's probably going to twist everything and make it seem like I'm to blame for all of this. You deserve to know the truth, Emma. Your mom's been cheating for a while now. I don't know exactly how long, or how many times, but she's made her choice. And just so you know, this guy she's with, well, he's not the kind of person you should be around. I'll explain more when you come home. I asked Emma to come home that weekend so we could talk, and thankfully, she agreed. After hanging up, I made another call, this time to Anna, our neighbor down the street. She'd been there for me through a lot of this mess. Anna, it's Adam. If that offer still stands, I'd like to take you up on it. Can you swing by in about an hour? I didn't dive into all the details, just enough to let her know I needed some support. Melissa and I had met when we were young, got married quickly, and before long, we had Emma. It seemed fine in the beginning, but as the years passed, Melissa became someone I barely recognized. She grew colder, more manipulative, and tried to control everything. No matter how much I bent over backward to keep the peace or make her happy, nothing seemed to work. Looking back now, I realize I was breaking my own back for someone who didn't even care. In trying to fix things, I only made life harder for myself. Now, in our 40s, it had all fallen apart. I found out she was seeing some guy named Greg, short for Gregory, a guy with a nasty temper. When I finally came to terms with the fact that our marriage couldn't be saved, I felt this strange sense of relief. I'd actually been preparing for this long before I knew about the affair. I've heard stories of guys who walk away with half the money. Not me. I took every last penny I could get my hands on, emptied every bit of cash in the house. I changed the locks and set the stage for Melissa's downfall. She might have been a handful, but I knew her too well. I'd been planning this for years, secretly recording our arguments. Melissa always thought that little device I carried around was just an old MP3 player, but it was a recorder, capturing every cruel word she threw my way. I knew no one would believe me without solid proof, so I made sure to collect plenty. I wanted Emma to see who her mother really was, and I wanted the world to know the truth. By Monday, I had arranged a little celebration at work in the break room. A banner hung over the table that read, "Happy Divorce," with cake and ice cream laid out for everyone. I sat there waiting for the process server, eager to get the ball rolling. Lucky for me, the process server turned out to be a cheerful, chubby girl who seemed to enjoy the moment almost as much as I did. She snapped plenty of pictures while my coworkers and I made a whole spectacle of celebrating my divorce papers. In one of the photos, I'm kissing her cheek while she wears a party hat, and in another, I'm feeding her cake, both of us grinning like a couple of fools. After the celebration died down, I sent Melissa an email with all the party photos attached. But I didn't stop there. I threw in a few extra photos for good measure. Among them were shots of Anna and me lounging in bed, smiling under the covers. I made sure Melissa would spot Anna wearing her old wedding rings, with her hand resting right on my chest. About an hour later, Melissa called, absolutely livid. "You scumbag. My lawyer is going to rip you apart when he sees those pictures. What were you thinking, you idiot?" I didn't even flinch. "Calm down, Melissa. There's nothing scandalous in those photos. No nudity. No inappropriate behavior. Just some harmless fun between neighbors. Lighten up," I shot back, savoring every bit of her anger. "We'll deal with this later, Adam," she snapped. "I'm coming by the house tonight to pick up a few things, and you better not be there. If I'm not home, you won't be able to get in. I've changed all the locks. If you need anything, you'll have to be here before 6:45. Anna and I have plans at 7, and I don't plan on being late," I told her, calm as ever. "Oh, and by the way, last night was the most fun I've had in years. Tonight's shaping up to be even better." With that, I hung up, ignoring the 5 or 6 times she called back afterward. I didn't bother picking up, but I made sure to listen to every voicemail she left. I knew that in her anger, Melissa might let something useful slip, something I could use against her, and sure enough, over the next few weeks, she did just that. That afternoon, around 4:30, I drove over to Melissa's workplace, making sure to get there before rush hour traffic hit. I had something quick and sneaky in mind, so I scoped out the parking lot for cameras. Nothing. Perfect. I parked right next to her car and made a quick circle around it with my wire cutters, snipping off the valve stems from all her tires. I knew she'd lose it, and there was no way she'd be able to get them fixed in time to make it home by 6:45. Sure enough, at 6:35, she rolled up, clearly in a rush, probably desperate to get back to the house. I could tell she hadn't come straight from work, no surprise there. She'd likely been with her new boyfriend again. I knew from the receipts I'd found that she kept clothes stashed at his place, so I figured she wasn't rushing home for a wardrobe change. I slipped out the back and headed to Anna's house, leaving Melissa to pound on the door and scream her head off. Later that evening, when I came back, I found one of the front windows smashed with blood splattered all over it. After checking the footage from the porch camera, I called the cops. The video showed everything as clear as day. Melissa had taken a tire iron to the window, screaming threats at me while doing it. She'd cut her arm pretty bad in the process, but the lock I'd installed, which needed a key from both sides, had kept her from getting inside. The next morning, I filed a restraining order against her, and the papers were served that same day. She was officially banned from coming within 500 feet of me or the house. Her reaction was, of course, explosive. "What the hell are you doing, you idiot?" was the start of her next call, full of fury and more threats. I recorded the entire thing, like always. A few hours later, after she had cooled off a bit, Melissa called again. This time she mentioned sending her friend Lindsay over to pick up some of her things. That piqued my interest. What was Melissa so desperate to get out of the house? My curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed to meet Lindsay at 5:30 the next day. That Tuesday, I left work early, set up a small video camera in the bedroom, and linked it to a monitor in my office. I wanted to keep a close eye on whatever Lindsay was up to. She arrived right on time, and I greeted her with a friendly smile, acting like everything was perfectly normal. As she started packing up clothes into 2 black trash bags, I sat on the bed, watching her carefully. She seemed a little nervous, but I didn't let on that I noticed. Then she asked for some water, so I got up and headed into the kitchen. But as I checked the monitor, I saw her pull a shoebox out of Melissa's closet and slip it into one of the bags. After that, she went right back to packing clothes like nothing had happened. When I returned with the water, she hurried to finish up and said she was done, suggesting we each carry one of the bags out to her car. She insisted on carrying the heavier one herself, which only made me more suspicious. As we headed toward the door, I stopped her in her tracks. "Is there something in that bag I should know about?" I asked, gripping her wrist gently. Lindsay's face drained of color, and she stammered something about the box just holding some clothes that Melissa needed. But the nervous look in her eyes gave her away. She was lying. When I opened the box, the unmistakable scent of old cash hit me like a brick. Inside, there were stacks of worn $50 and $100 bills. "You were trying to steal from me," I said, standing up and blocking the doorway. No, it's Melissa's money. She told me to come get it. I wasn't going to keep it for myself." Lindsay pleaded, her voice trembling. I crossed my arms, not believing a word. "You came here to pack clothes, and now you're walking out with a box full of cash. That's theft, plain and simple. I should call the cops right now." Her eyes welled up with tears. "Please, Adam, don't call the police. I've got kids, a husband. I'm not a thief, I swear." I let her sit down on the couch, the tension hanging thick in the air for a moment. "Lindsay, I'm disappointed in you. You're no longer welcome in this house. But if you want a chance to make this right, you have one option. Go back to Melissa and tell her I caught you red-handed. Then, from now on, you're going to report everything you see or hear about her and Greg straight back to me. Especially anything about the divorce." Lindsay, through sobs, nodded, knowing she didn't have much of a choice. "And you're not to breathe a word about our arrangement," I told her firmly. "Melissa made a huge mistake getting involved with that loser, and in the end, you're going to help her realize she needs to leave him. I made sure Lindsay understood the stakes. I had everything on video, and if she didn't cooperate, I could turn the footage over to the police whenever I wanted. With a heavy sigh, she reluctantly agreed to be my eyes and ears. As soon as she left, I grabbed that box of cash and headed straight over to Anna's place. She agreed to hide it for me until I figured out a safer spot to stash it, somewhere Melissa would never get her hands on. I had a pretty good idea of where the money had come from, too. Melissa's Aunt Doris, known for being stingy, had passed away a few months earlier, leaving everything to Melissa. I knew about the cottage Aunt Doris left her, but there was no mention of a pile of cash. It seemed Melissa had stumbled upon the hidden money when she went to check out the cottage after the will reading. Later that evening, Melissa called, absolutely losing her mind. I made sure to record every second of the conversation. "That money is mine, Adam. I want my damn money back," she screamed, her voice dripping with fury. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Melissa," I replied, calm as ever. "I caught Lindsay trying to swipe some cash off my nightstand, so I took it back. If there was money in a shoebox, I don't know anything about that." "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Adam," she spat. "The money from Aunt Doris." "Well, if Lindsay found some cash in a shoebox, maybe she kept it for herself," I suggested. "I don't have it. And if you didn't tell me about this money, then I'm guessing you didn't report it on your taxes either. I've looked over last year's returns. Feel free to involve the police, Melissa. Then we can loop in the IRS and have a chat about your little case of tax evasion." There was a long silence before she hung up. I'd clearly hit a nerve. At this point, I knew Melissa wouldn't go down without a fight. I'd pushed her too far, and I expected some kind of retaliation. With the restraining order keeping her away from me personally, I figured she'd try to hit me where she thought it would hurt. My car. Just like I had done to hers. So, I made sure to be prepared. I already had a dashboard camera installed, but that wasn't enough. I needed something that would catch her in the act if she tried anything. So on Wednesday morning, I parked my car out front and set up a second camera on the exterior of the house. It was well hidden, streaming directly to my laptop, which I checked about an hour before I had to leave. Sure enough, around midday, there she was, Melissa, pulling up behind my car, hammer in hand. I watched live as she went to work, smashing the windows, denting the panels, and shattering the windshield, all while screaming like a maniac. A chill ran down my spine as I dialed 911. By the time she was pulling out of the driveway, the police were already waiting for her at the end of the block. With the video footage of her destroying my Toyota, it didn't take much for the officers to arrest her. To make things worse for herself, she resisted arrest, which only piled on more charges. As they hauled her away, I made sure to meet her gaze. Her eyes were full of desperation, but I just stood there, silent. Later that same day, Melissa's divorce lawyer called me, informing me about an upcoming court hearing regarding the money I'd withdrawn from our joint accounts. The hearing was set for Thursday morning at 10 a.m., and I made sure to get there early. Melissa walked in just before the hearing, her lawyer by her side, wearing that same smug expression I'd grown used to. Her lawyer began by addressing the judge. "Your Honor, my client has been unfairly denied access to the joint bank accounts. After she filed for divorce, her husband emptied them completely. We're requesting a fair 50-50 split." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Mitchell, would you like to respond?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, standing up. "My wife has been withdrawing money from our joint accounts for months, funneling it into her personal account while still expecting me to cover all the bills and rent. The money I withdrew was simply compensation for what I've already paid, considering she abandoned our marriage to be with her lover." Melissa shot up from her seat, interrupting. "That's not true. He drained our savings and left me with nothing." But her lawyer quickly pulled her back down, whispering urgently. I handed a stack of documents to the judge. These are bank statements from the past year, Your Honor. They show Melissa's regular salary deposits and bonuses until about 6 months ago, when they stopped. I also have a recorded call with her HR department confirming she switched her direct deposits to a private account around that same time. The total amount she diverted from our joint account is substantial. The judge flipped through the papers before looking at Melissa. Ms. Mitchell, do you have anything to say? Her lawyer stood cautiously. Your Honor, even if my client has her own funds, Mr. Mitchell is still obligated to provide her with half of the marital assets. The judge didn't look impressed. Counselor, I don't take kindly to dishonesty. Your client claimed she was left with nothing, yet it's clear she was siphoning off funds behind her husband's back. Given that Mr. Mitchell has been covering the household expenses, there is no reason to alter the financial arrangements at this time. The division of assets will be addressed in the final divorce decree. Case closed. As I was leaving the courthouse, Melissa cornered me in the hallway, her face twisted with anger. She started hurling threats, but I calmly pulled out my phone. Melissa, you're violating the restraining order right now. If you don't walk away, I'll be calling the police. Oh, and how's jail? Ready for another stint? You've still got criminal charges hanging over your head. She clenched her fists, her face flushed with rage, but she backed down, watching me walk away. Later that night, I decided to check out a different bar, the one where I'd met an interesting guy named Ethan a while back. Luckily, he was there again. I walked up, greeted him, and asked if he remembered me. Ethan gave me a sideways grin. Your name ain't important, friend, he said. And that was the beginning of an even stranger chapter in my life. Ethan leaned back in his chair, shaking his head as he started talking about his beat-up car. Yeah, I still got that old junker. My wife took the good one when she ran off with her new guy. Left me with a car that doesn't even have working air conditioning. Can't afford to fix it either. I nodded, seeing an opportunity. What's your insurance like, Ethan? If you play your cards right, I might be able to help you get something a little more comfortable. His eyes sparked with curiosity. I'm listening. Picture this. You're driving down 38th Street, minding your business, when all of a sudden, a gray cat darts out in front of your car. You slam on the brakes, naturally, and the lady tailing you rear-ends that old heap of yours. She's going faster than 15 miles an hour, so it could be a total loss. But as long as you've got your seatbelt on and your head against the headrest, you'll walk away just fine. And the insurance? That'll cover the damages. Might even get you something with working AC. Ethan hesitated, looking a little unsure. Yeah, but what if the woman who hits me gets hurt? I couldn't live with that on my conscience. I gave him a knowing look. Trust me, Ethan, this woman's no angel. She's been stepping out on her husband. And if you follow the plan, there won't be anyone else in her car. You don't need to worry about her. He grinned. Man, I hate cheaters. And I definitely need to get rid of this car. Alright, tell me more. Here's the deal. Tomorrow, park at the corner of 38th and Lessing at 5 p.m. sharp. Keep an eye out for a blue Miata pulling out of the parking lot. When you see it, pull out in front of her. She's not the type to pass cars, so just drive slowly for a block or two until she's right on your tail. Then, you'll see the cat dart across the road. Slam the brakes, stay in the car, and call emergency services. Mention a possible neck injury, just to be safe. Oh, and remember, we never met. I won't be back at this bar, and we don't know each other. Ethan chuckled, raising his drink. Man, I'm colder than the AC in my new car. On Friday, I left work a little early so I could be home when Emma arrived. She'd finished her classes and came back that Sunday evening. We sat down to talk about everything, the divorce, the mess with her mom, and all the things in between. I even played her the recording of the door number 3 conversation I had with Melissa. Emma was stunned by the coldness in her mother's voice, by how calculating she'd been. It was a side of Melissa my daughter had never seen before. After that, I shared more recordings from the last 2 years, revealing the ugly truth about how her mother had treated me. Emma sat there in silence, trying to take it all in. "What do you know about the guy Mom's with, Dad?" she finally asked. "All I know is he's bad news, and I don't want you anywhere near him," I warned her. "If you need to meet with your mom, do it in a public place. I'm not sure what this guy's capable of, and I don't want you getting mixed up in something dangerous. Just be careful, all right? And always carry something to protect yourself, just in case." Emma looked down, clearly struggling to process everything. "I knew you and Mom had problems, but I never realized it was this bad. What went wrong between you two?" I'd been expecting that question and had my answer ready. I explained to her that the core of our issues boiled down to different views on marriage. After thinking about it for a long time, I'd figured out that there are really 4 ways power can be divided in a relationship. First, you've got the kind of relationship where neither person steps up to lead. Everything just drifts along, like a ship without a captain, and nothing ever really gets done. Then, there's the constant power struggle, where both people are always trying to take charge, leading to constant clashes. I paused, watching Emma listen closely. Some couples split the responsibilities, which is what I'd hoped for when I married your mom. I wanted an equal partnership, where we'd make decisions together and share the load. But that's not how it worked out. Emma nodded, taking it all in. Then there's the traditional setup, where the man takes full control. Some folks think that's outdated, maybe even oppressive. But in the right relationship, if the man is truly devoted to making his wife happy, it can feel like a fairy tale for the right kind of woman. Take your grandparents, for example. Your grandmother was more passive, and your grandfather took the lead. It worked for them, even though he could be a bit tough at times. I stopped for a moment, letting her absorb what I was saying. Your mom, I believe, grew up expecting that same dynamic. She watched her dad take charge and assumed I'd do the same. But when I tried to share the responsibilities equally, she saw it as a sign of weakness. No matter how hard I tried to make her happy, she lost respect for me. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. And that's where we ended up in the last scenario. The wife takes over. Your mom decided she needed to run the show, and when I didn't live up to her impossible standards, she became mean. She started bossing me around, deciding which projects we'd work on, and nitpicking every little thing I did until I couldn't take it anymore. She'd even tell me how to hold the tools when I was fixing something, like I was some kind of idiot who didn't know how to use a wrench. That's when it all started falling apart. Emma looked pained, but she didn't interrupt. When a wife takes over like that, it throws off the natural balance, at least in my opinion. No man can thrive in a relationship where he's constantly emasculated. No matter how much love he still feels, the respect fades. And once that respect is gone, the marriage is in a downward spiral. That's what happened between me and your mom. I couldn't live like that anymore, and when I finally pushed back, she treated me like a rebellious kid. I don't think she'll ever respect me again, no matter what I do. I took a deep breath and added, this divorce might be my only shot at getting some of that respect back, but honestly, I doubt it'll ever happen. The damage has already been done. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing everything I just laid out for her. I understand why you're doing this now, Dad. I see how hard it's been for you to stand up to her. I nodded. It's important you remember this, Emma, when you're making decisions about your own relationships. Whether it's choosing a career, buying a house, or starting a family, mutual respect has to be at the core. If you don't have that, nothing else will work. I stressed to Emma how critical it is for both partners to understand what they're signing up for in a relationship so they don't end up in the same miserable mess her mom and I found ourselves in. She nodded, clearly taking it all to heart. I'll keep that in mind, Dad, she promised, and I could tell she was seriously considering everything I'd said. Just then, the phone rang. Mr. Mitchell, this is Memorial Hospital. Your wife's been in a car accident. She's stable and not seriously hurt, but she'll need to stay overnight. Emma and I drove straight to the hospital. When we arrived, I let her go in first. She didn't stay long, and when she came back out, looking upset, I knew she hadn't gone easy on her mom. I could only imagine what Emma had said to Melissa. I walked in after her. Melissa looked rough, her face bruised, arm in a cast. Well, you look like hell, Melissa, I said with a smirk. Tough week, huh? Lost your marriage, your husband, your house, got slapped with a restraining order, arrested for a felony, and now your car's totaled. Here you are, lying in a hospital bed with a broken wrist and a busted face. Seems like this divorce is going a whole lot better for me than it is for you. Freak you, she muttered, trying to sound tough, but she was too worn down to sell it. Come on, Melissa. What happened to your clever little comebacks? Has your knight in shining armor, Greg, shown up to visit yet? Oh, wait, he's probably busy with one of his other two women. You didn't know about them, did you? Bet you didn't see that coming. I watched her face go pale. Yeah, Melissa. You were never his one and only. How long until you're taking turns with the other women? Never thought of you as someone who'd share, but you might want to learn. Could come in handy for your new life in prison. I'm not going to jail, she snapped. My lawyer's gonna get the charges dropped. I chuckled. Really? You think you're walking away from this? You smashed up my car, threatened me, and now you're sitting there thinking you'll skate out of it? I had a little chat with the DA, Melissa. He's coming for you hard. He's got photos, video evidence, and he's got an election to win. You're the perfect target. She sat there, stunned, staring at the floor. Oh, by the way, did you figure out who to call about your car insurance yet? I asked, knowing full well she hadn't. Car insurance? What are you talking about? She looked genuinely confused. Wait, you didn't get new insurance when you filed for divorce? I took your car off my policy. You must have known that. You insisted on keeping your name on the Miata. Well, if you didn't bother getting new coverage, you're in deep trouble. That car's totaled, and now you've got fines, towing fees, and 3 years of payments ahead of you. That Miata might be sitting in a junkyard while you're still paying it off. And considering you're about to lose your job after the felony conviction, you won't be needing another car anytime soon. I leaned in closer, twisting the knife. And I'm guessing you'll have to cover the medical bills for the guy you hit, too. His insurance company's gonna come after you for that. But hey, at least you've still got health insurance, right? Her eyes widened. I'm still on yours. I shook my head. Nope. I took you off my health insurance on Monday. Didn't you take care of that? Guess not. So that means the ambulance ride, the ER visit, X-rays, doctor fees, your cast, and this whole hospital stay, all out of pocket. That's gonna run you thousands. You might want to start thinking about how you're gonna cover that. She looked like she was on the verge of breaking down. But I didn't care. Speaking of health, I added, remember a couple of years ago when you got sick? I took a week off work to take care of you, cleaned up after you, made sure you had your medicine, did everything I could to help, and what did I get in return? A week later, when you felt better, you started yelling at me again, calling me names. I wonder how well Greg's gonna take care of you the next time you're sick. Somehow, I don't think he's the type to hold your hair while you're throwing up. I glanced at the clock. Well, I guess I'd better give Greg a call. Let him know you're free now that his other woman's probably done with him for the night. I turned to leave, hearing her sob quietly behind me. I didn't look back. I was done with her. Things settled down for a while after that. I kept checking in on Lindsay every now and then, just to make sure she wasn't getting too caught up in Melissa's mess. She started distancing herself from Melissa, worried about the grip Greg had over her. It didn't take long for Lindsay to see that Melissa was spiraling fast. Then, one night, as I was heading up the walkway to my house, I got jumped. I'd been on edge, expecting something like this eventually, but I didn't see it coming. A guy in a ski mask tackled me, knocking the wind out of me, and twisted my arm behind my back. "Give me the box of money," he growled, "and tell the DA to drop the charges." I was pinned, feeling helpless, but I still had my car key remote in my hand. I fumbled for the panic button and hit it. The car alarm blared, and lights flicked on from the neighbors' houses. The masked man, Greg, no doubt, punched me again, furious, but bolted as people started peeking out their windows. I shouted for someone to call 911, and a cop showed up a few minutes later. I wasn't hurt badly enough for an ambulance, and by the time they arrived, Greg was long gone. None of the neighbors had gotten a clear look, so he slipped away without facing the consequences for the attack. The real shock came the next day when I told Emma about what had happened. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Dad, I didn't want to tell you, but I had a run-in with Greg too." I froze. "What do you mean?" "Mom called me, asked me to meet up." I agreed, but I told her I didn't want to go to their apartment. When I got there, she sat me down on the couch, and then Greg came out. He told me that since Mom wasn't doing well with her injuries, I'd have to take care of his needs. He said she owed him, and I'd have to pay for it. I felt a lump in my throat, but I stayed silent as Emma continued. I looked at Mom, and she just stared at the floor. She didn't say a word. Greg told me to make her listen to him. And then, Mom, she looked at me and begged, "Please, baby, just do what he says. It won't be that bad. I really need you to do this for me." I felt sick to my stomach. "What did you do?" Emma clenched her fists, her voice trembling. He grabbed my wrist and started pulling me toward the bedroom. But I had pepper spray in my purse, and I sprayed it right in his face. Greg screamed, clawing at his eyes, and I ran for the door, grabbing my purse and trying to pull Mom with me. But she wouldn't come. She rushed over to help Greg instead, yelling for me to leave. She chose him over me. My heart broke hearing that. "She chose that scumbag over you?" "Yeah, Dad," Emma said, her voice thick with anger and disgust. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her for that." Hearing Emma say that made my blood boil in a way it never had before. I found myself pacing the house, thinking about the Beretta I kept in the bedroom. I'll admit, I almost went for it. But after a while, Emma reassured me that she wasn't physically hurt. She urged me to think about the future instead of what I might do in my anger. I made her promise me something then, never walk alone until after the trial and always keep something with her for protection. She agreed, and that put me a little more at ease. Still, Greg was out there, taunting me, thinking he could intimidate me into backing off. But I had something he didn't expect. I went straight to the DA with a recording of Emma describing what Greg had done to her, along with details of his attack on me. When the DA asked if I'd consider going easy on Melissa or dropping the charges, I gave him a firm no. "She's under Greg's control, and the only way to help her is to separate them," I told him. "A little time in prison might just straighten her out." The DA agreed, and the trial moved forward. I stayed on guard, but there were moments when I felt vulnerable, especially when I left for work or came home, pulling into that isolated garage down the long ranch road. It was about 10 miles from the nearest turnoff, and anything could happen out there. That's why I always had my Beretta with me in the car, just in case. One evening, just days before Melissa's trial, I noticed a pickup truck following me about 2 miles from home. The headlights were blinding in my rearview mirror, and my gut told me something was off. The truck was riding my bumper hard, barely 20 feet from me at 55 miles per hour. I grabbed my phone, called 911, and started recording. I sped up to 70, but the truck kept pace, sticking right on me. I frantically told the dispatcher what was happening and asked them to notify the detective handling my assault case. The truck tailed me relentlessly for another 5 miles as I narrated everything into the phone, just in case things went south. The pistol sat on the seat next to me, ready for whatever was coming. As I approached a small bridge over a creek, a sick feeling twisted in my stomach. I knew the driver was about to try forcing me off the road. Sure enough, the truck accelerated and pulled up alongside me, trying to shove me toward the edge. That's when I caught a glimpse of Melissa's face in the passenger seat. They were coming for me. I slammed on the brakes, skidding hard but managing to stay in control. The truck flew past me, stopping just ahead. My car slid to a stop on the shoulder, half hanging over a slope down to the creek bed. I grabbed my gun, phone, and recorder and scrambled out of the car, heading down the slope to take cover under the bridge. For a brief moment, I heard the truck's brake lights click on and thought they were coming after me. The darkness under the bridge was thick, and though I was wary of snakes or anything else lurking in the shadows, Greg was the real threat. I found a spot to crouch and kept the Beretta close, waiting. Time seemed to stretch out forever, but in reality, it was only a few minutes. Then, finally, I heard sirens in the distance. I started making my way back up the slope, leaving the gun behind. As I reached the road, I raised my hands, hoping the arriving officers wouldn't mistake me for the threat. Sure enough, they blocked the road, sirens blaring, just as the pickup truck tried to make a run for it. But the police were ready. I heard the screech of tires as the officers ordered Greg and Melissa to get out and lie on the ground. They were cuffed and hauled away, both now facing attempted murder charges. I made it home that night, but I couldn't sleep. I stood under the shower for what felt like hours, trying to wash away the shock of everything that had happened. Having a spouse facing multiple felonies made the divorce process much easier, though. The judge showed me some sympathy, and Melissa's lawyer didn't put up much of a fight. She was desperate to avoid a long prison sentence and willing to give up nearly everything to make it happen. At the sentencing hearing, I did something I never thought I'd do. I stood up in court and spoke about the good person Melissa used to be before she fell under Greg's spell. I even told the court that, with time, I might be able to forgive her for trying to kill me. I left out her cheating and all the years of torment. I didn't know what Melissa thought of my testimony. She didn't look at me, and I didn't look at her. In the end, Greg got a long sentence. I like to think he's sharing a cell with some guy named Max who's making his life a living hell. Melissa didn't get off easy either, but the judge gave her a bit more leniency. She wouldn't be eligible for parole for at least 3 years. That was 4 years ago. Melissa's been out on parole for about a year now, but I haven't heard a word from her. The DA's office informed me of her release, but she hasn't tried to contact Emma, and I didn't expect her to reach out to me either. Revenge had seemed sweet at first, but in the end, it left me feeling empty. No matter what I did, I couldn't stop replaying everything that had happened. Maybe that's why, out of the blue, I picked up the phone and called my ex-wife. "Melissa, this is Adam. I've got something of yours, and I want it back." I had called the rehab center where she was staying. For a few moments, there was nothing but silence on the other end. I wasn't even sure if she was going to respond. "Melissa, I want to return your shoebox. Can you hear me? Can we meet so I can give it back to you?" I half expected her to hang up, but after a long pause, she finally spoke. "Where? When?" "I don't care," I replied. I suggested meeting at a neutral place, maybe a restaurant, or she could come by the house. "Are you free on Sunday?" I asked. Another silence. Then she answered. "I'll be there on Sunday." At 2 p.m. that Sunday, the phone rang. How does one even prepare to meet their ex-wife, the mother of their child, the woman who tried to have them killed, and a convicted felon? Well, I made lemonade and baked cookies. When Melissa arrived, there was no handshake, no hug. Just a simple hello. I motioned for her to step inside the office. Her hair was shorter now, her face looked worn and tired. She wasn't wearing much makeup, if any at all. She looked older than her 50 years, more like 65. I had set out drinks, cookies, and the shoebox on the coffee table between us. She sat down across from me, refusing the drink when I offered it. Did she really think I might poison her? Well, if you don't want lemonade or cookies, I suppose you're just here for the shoebox and whatever else we have to say, I said, trying to break the tension. She was still wary, her eyes hard as she studied me. What's the catch, Adam? What do you want in return? Is there anything left? No catch, Melissa. It's all there, except for a few thousand I added to and gave to Emma for a down payment on her house when she got married. If you want, Emma can start paying you back, but I just gave her my half. Melissa's expression changed then. She hadn't known Emma was married. Emma's been married for 2 years now, I told her. And you're a grandmother. Her little girl's name is Emily Rachel Lewis. Emily, after her other grandmother. Tears filled Melissa's eyes, despite her efforts to hold them back. You haven't spoken to Emma in a while, but there's still a way for you two to reconnect. I can help with that, if you want, I offered gently. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I reached for the box of tissues I'd left on the table. If you're not ready to leave just yet, I can give you the short version of what's been happening, I said, offering her a chance to stay. She wiped her face, trying to regain some composure. Emma's found herself a great guy named John Lewis. He works in IT, and they really click. She's a wonderful mom, Melissa, and they're happy together. I paused. As for me and Anna, well, that didn't last long. She was too young for me, and once she got her life back on track, she moved on. I date here and there, but nothing serious. I've learned I'm better off on my own. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then I continued, more for myself than for her. I'm going to share a few thoughts, just because I need to get them out. Maybe you'll get something from them too, I don't know. But I've been sitting with these thoughts for a long time. I leaned back, looking her straight in the eye. I couldn't wait to see you locked up. I hated you, Melissa. I wished you were dead more times than I can count. But after they put you in prison, something in me shifted. I couldn't enjoy the victory. I realized I didn't want to carry that hatred around anymore. So, even though you never asked for it, I forgave you. I paused, watching her stare at the floor, looking more lost than I'd ever seen her. She didn't say a word. I realized you weren't entirely to blame. We just couldn't understand each other. By the time I figured that out, it was too late. All we did was fight. Melissa sat there, still staring at the ground, not saying anything. That's the truth, I said quietly. If you have nothing more to add, and if you're not hungry, I won't keep you any longer. I'm sure you have plenty to do. She stood up, grabbed the shoebox, and headed toward the front door. For the first time since I'd kicked her out all those years ago, I called out to her. Melissa, it doesn't matter now, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm curious. All those years we were together, especially that last day, it was clear you thought I was weak. Do you still think I'm a pushover? Her hand hesitated on the doorknob, and she glanced back at me. Her expression was bitter, but she finally spoke. I hated you, Adam. You were cruel, and you ruined my life. There was a pause before she added, but no, I don't think you're a pushover. With that, she walked out of my life for good.